a little bit in my own ear, but I think I can handle that. All right. You good, Erin?
I'm good. Yeah, I don't hear an echo either. So happy to be here on this topic that was inspired by you. I'm very
Thanks.
passionate about it, but it's inspired by that diagram that you have for. Did you make it for your project course coming up, or is it just something that you use throughout?
Yeah, well, I've been on this journey of kind of mapping this myself. And the the reason that it became available was actually, I'm working with my volume here just a moment, was because I was tracking my own relationship with my resources and where they were valued or not valued in the external. So when I was going through this process of sacred remembering and like reclaiming the feminine and like walking my own soul path and like doing what I quote unquote felt like I was supposed to be doing with my life, there were reflections where sometimes people valued that and sometimes people didn't value that. And it, of course, wasn't all like I couldn't control whether or not people valued it, right? Or whether there was reciprocity. So there was a lot of looking at, what people wanted, particularly men in masculinity, what they wanted, and then what they were actually honoring and valuing. And so that, like, I started to map, like, okay, of all of the resources that women have, that like inherently, right? And I started talking about internal resources versus like the external resources, the ones that we go after or we might need in order to live in the modern world, like money or housing, right? So I started calling them external and internal are the ones that are super inherent to us and don't really have like a set economic value, right? Because when we bring in the economics, it gets super interesting because sometimes a woman's energy is economically valued, sometimes it's not.
Mhm.
So that's kind of how it came to be. And then I've been writing this book about women's resources in conjunction with the land. And the book parallels this experience that I had, like this awakening that I had with this piece of land that was beside a stone quarry. So the land was like continually extracted from.
Mhm.
And it was like this mirror of, you know, I mean, a quarry is like desecrating a piece of earth, right? So I was having this mystical experience with this land, um, and the feminine in the land
Mhm.
as I was really awakening to, what's it going to take for the feminine to be sovereign and returned and like truly back, like back in action.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
yeah. So that's a bit about how this diagram that you saw came about.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me. I don't know if I can pop off of Riverside here to get on it. Maybe you can just go through those internal ones and those external ones on your
Mm,
diagram. But just to respond to that, you know, I think we all find this conversation within us at at some point of our lives, many different ways, like whether we are younger and unaware of this. And I know that you track this as a topic with your work as well as depletion, right? So these times when
yeah.
we're depleted as women, we're almost confused to why, like what resource feels depleted in our society. These external resources are the ones that we gravitate
Yeah.
towards and are told to gravitate towards to fix the depletion, right?
Right.
And so then that's where the confusion happens. And for women, whether it's money or sexuality or purpose or any of those things, they're all so tightly woven with these
Yes.
external resources. So then the internal resources become quieter
Yeah.
and we become more depleted. So when I'm working with women, working with her body and her hormones, it's kind of the combination of both to work with women in this of, we do need the structural outside resources
Yeah.
to feel supported, to have that masculine support, woven with the feminine. We do need that, just to weave it back hormonally. We do need to like be aware of how we feed ourselves and how to replenish ourselves. But if women are walking around, and I think that this is the case where we're walking around sort of blindsided to understand that these internal resources need replenishing, and what are they, and how do we link the external to the internal, and
Mhm.
why are why are we so depleted, like
Right.
why that's the biggest question, like why are we so depleted, why are our resources taken from us, and what, like you said, what will it take, like what does it take?
Yeah. Well, it takes us remembering and getting
Mhm.
our internal resources sovereign is what I
Mhm.
think. And then sovereign and resourced, right? Like connected back to source, connected to the positive energy grids that run source energy through creation. And we're really a conduit for that. But of course, that was a mass forgetting. So, that means that there's an opportunity for a mass remembering,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And so, well, you asked about the internal resources. And again, it's like what I was trying to do was name something that was super nebulous
Yeah.
because I was finding myself in these situations, which if I had followed the modern paradigm, and in many cases I did, I followed like coaching rhetoric, I followed masculine feminine polarity rhetoric, like not followed it, but like I participated in that, right? But then I was still experiencing not not just depletion in my own self, but like literally extraction. Like,
Mhm.
because it was that, like that the value wasn't translating.
Right.
Like I was remembering and valuing, but it wasn't translating. And we
Mhm.
have these really cliche sorts of things that we hear, again, in the coaching industry and in like the memes on the internet that's like, well, if you just had better self-value, if you just had better boundaries, then everything would be working out for you. If you only valued yourself more and could charge more, then, all of your problems would be solved. And it's like gaslighting women and totally ignoring the fact that feminine resources have been extracted systematically for thousands of years.
Mhm.
And what
Mhm.
I mean by that is like, I mean, this is a really big, like, well of a topic for me.
Yeah.
So, again, some feminine resources were quote unquote valued and others were like expected of women. So, women's bodies were just expected to be available, women's energy was just expected to be available on the whole, for a very long time. So, we actually have to heal and repair our awareness with that and our awareness with these, what I've pared down to these 8 feminine resources. And you asked what they are, so I'll
Yeah.
name them. Um, our time. So these are like the things that, we're born into a body, we get these. We wake up in the morning, we have these.
Yeah.
Like, regardless of what's going on the external, right? So we always have our time, our attention, our life force energy, however full we are, like we have our life force energy. We have our bodies, like our physicality.
Mhm.
Then I put the womb, our sexuality, our creativity in one category. Another one that's really big is our feminine ways of knowing, like our wisdom, our gnosis, our intuition, our oracular knowing, right? And that's something that we recultivate on a feminine pathway, right? What I call sacred remembering. Um, our emotional energy, which many women are now familiar with the term, emotional laboring, which is great. And then our heart, our love, like I mean, we love to give our love. So I'm totally willing to, to be wrong about this. Like maybe there are 10, maybe there are, like it does, whatever. I'm
Yeah.
not totally attached to this, right? But for me, that wheel of these 8 feminine resources, and then in the 8-week group that I have called Resource, we go through each of these. And again, like go into the sovereignty of them and what's our own relationship with each of these. So, an example that I often use, which I know that you probably do too, being in the like women's hormonal space, is if I have so much energy in a day and I have to get tasks done,
Hmm.
how do I treat my body, my cortisol levels? Like if I'm like, well, I need more energy, so I'll just slug more caffeine, I'm actually assaulting my hormonal system. I'm like assaulting my feminine
Hmm.
body, my system. So that's like an internalized willingness to disrespect that feminine energy that we've learned from the
Hmm.
culture, which kind of takes us into a conversation maybe about, yeah, like how we're taught to suppress those feminine resources in the um, quest for
Yeah.
the external. Like, well,
Hmm.
you need a man, you need the money, you need the bigger house, you need the fancy handbag, you need, right? So, like, it's kind of this, come on, women, where's your worth? Where's your,
Right.
like, where's your money? Where's your, like, your amassed stuff? And I was like, well, at what expense? Oh.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, you know, there's such big contrast happening. We talk about the rise of the feminine, and you talk about a lot of earth energetics, and
Yeah.
that's happening right now. But with it is, with women coming forward and making more money and charging more money and having more things and the boss babe and all of these things. I think we're confusing a big conversation of resources, and we're actually dividing. And this is what I have
Mm-hmm.
personally witnessed, is that we're dividing amongst each other because of this sort of overlay that we have that's very old of scarcity around our resources. Because even when a woman, I think, what I see is, or I question with the money, with the I'm charging X amount on my for my courses. I've got the man, I got the handbag. With that, I think that there's this, the underlying depletion is still being hijacked from her because these inner resources aren't, being nourished at all. But it's really sneaky, I think, right
Mm-hmm.
now in the new age world. I posted something, and this was kind of part of why we kind of got on this topic. I posted something recently over on Facebook that I saw a woman charging $55,000 for like a 3-month course, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I had just come out and said, like, my nervous system goes into major, like, contraction over that. And I wonder what this is about. So some of the comments in there were women saying, it depends, if she's making 100,000 a month, she should be able to do that. And then, there was other comments that were about, well, if she does it, if a woman is not charging $55,000, or if she's someone like me that has a nervous system reaction to it, then her energy system of receiving is blocked. And
Yeah.
that right there is where I think that we're divided. There's the
Right.
bigger conversation of, like, we all need to come into a room together to even raise our hands and say, Yeah, I do need to make money, and I do want to charge my worth if you're an entrepreneur, and I do want relationship and a man, but I'm also depleted over here. And
Yeah.
everyone truthfully raising their hand,
Right.
and coming together, because
Yeah.
that's where I see those inner resources, and the topic of, land energetics, and just really spanning out. That's where I see it really coming together in full circle, because
Mhm.
that's where I have a really triggering point. you know Even in my work with hormones, women are just saying, you should do this, you shouldn't do that, this is the right thing, right? And I'm just seeing this more and more of women are we're dividing amongst each
Mm.
other, and it's another layer of this old paradigm of fight to the top, right? Fight to the
Yeah.
top to get to these resources. And I think that women aren't ever given the space, and that's why I love that you're doing this project and this course, are ever given the space to actually, really look at all of these resources that you're talking about, and not have it just be one or two. Well, I'm depleted because obviously I don't have money, of course I'm depleted, right? And then someone may be like, well, I have money, but I do still feel depleted, but I'm not sure why, right? So
Right.
it's women, and I always say this, that I think the conversation between us as women is the most important conversation, because
Mm.
we share the correct information with each other once there's trust,
Right.
right? Like if you and I can vulnerably say to each other, I feel depleted, and we get to ask each other why, and to dig deeper in that space. I think that that's where those inner resources really start to rise a little bit
Yeah.
more for a woman, and then validate, yeah, you need to make money, right? Not, yeah, you need to have more structure, right? Like, so where can, because you and I have talked about this too. We'll go into collapse as women around these resources too, right? We're so tired from trying to make money and raise our children, and that then the inner resources become so depleted and collapse, because there's not an invitation for her to even look at
Mm.
the conversation of these inner resources being nurtured, and then combined with these outer resources of,
Mm.
yes, like, value yourself for wanting to make money, but yes, like, what, and this is where I think that what you do is so beautiful, and how you do it. What is your relationship to the masculine? What is your relationship to the land that you're around? What are these stories, and deconstructing them? So
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. There's a lot of programs at play on women. And like, as I say that, I actually feel emotional. Like,
Yeah.
my eyes kind of well up as I say that, because everything that you just mentioned, and I love that you're noticing that, because I've maybe like turtled a little bit. Like, I'm not noticing as much. I'm not as involved in what's kind of going on collectively, mainly because I'm wanting to be resourced in the ways that I'm wanting to be resourced. I'm raising a teenager. I'm diversifying income. And I'm really deeply listening to creation right now, which I'll get back to in a moment. So thank you for like naming what you're noticing. And I really value that. And when I hear that, I think of, we're all doing our best. We're all doing our best to try to navigate this fucked up matrix, and like where we are at this moment in time, and like the bridge to where we're going. And when I hear some of those templates, right, like um, saying that, you don't know how to receive if you can't charge $55,000, like what the actual fuck, like it's like I can't even imagine what I would charge $55,000 for. I mean, maybe if my time is way more valuable than it is now, because I'm way more successful than I am now. And I mean, I like to imagine this, right? Like, if somebody wants to fly me somewhere and like pay me 55 grand for me to consult and like do and speak,
Yeah.
like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
I I don't know that I'll ever feel comfortable saying to one woman, you know, $55,000, please. Um, and again, I do like if you have 100 grand a month, like, yeah, maybe that really doesn't, maybe it is okay and healthy for your nervous system. Like, okay,
Well, I think
please
we can.
don't do it if it's not.
Well, I think that that's right there is please don't do it if you're not. But I think, whether we're talking about charging for a course or buying a handbag or doing the thing or
Right,
whatever, I think it's that internal programming that's happening for women that she's not even just trusting and pausing for herself. And I think that that can transfer over to all these other areas of life of like, there's not the trust in self because we have depleted resources to even uh, ask ourselves like, okay, I make 100,000 a month. I could pay this woman. I could pay Sarah Poet 55,000. You know, and but what is like what why what is that
right,
like what's the value for it for
right.
me and it may be a yes but I think the reason why that it triggers me and I posted that is because I think the discernment that we have as women isn't there, and that's not to devalue us as women that
Mm-hmm.
we don't have that intuition, right? The discernment with
Right.
intuition. But I think that real sense of gnosis and intuition is lost when we're dangling all these like pretty things in front of each other as women of like, buy my course for 55,000, or you need that to feel resourceful, whatever it is. I think that deeper gnosis and intuition that takes time, that does take mistake. I believe that my intuition and gnosis has come from years
Mm-hmm.
of mistakes of saying yes at the
Mm-hmm.
wrong time and saying no at the wrong time. But how can we get to a place where our nervous system is valued, so we feel safe to say, I'm going to pause, or I'm going to say no, or I'm going to say
Mm-hmm.
yes, and it's
Mm-hmm.
coming from that instead of this hyper this hyper extraction
Mm-hmm.
of resources. And so again, just that example of charging for 55,000, I think it could be crossed over in so
Mm-hmm.
many different
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
areas of what you're talking about in your diagram, or in
Yeah.
just in our conversation.
I'm going to try to weave a couple of things together here, but I know that there are a million different directions that we
Mhm.
could go. Um, so when I'm hearing this, and it's like a woman saying to another woman, well, if you can't pay this, then you don't value yourself, or if you can't charge this, then you're not brave enough as a coach, or whatever. All of those rhetoric, that it is not the creational template. It is, so that's a template where we're working against one another. And as I tune into that energetically, I mean, it's exploitative and it's extractive, right? And then it's like women doing that to one another.
Yeah.
So this is what I'm
Just like,
saying. Like, yeah, right, right. Like you just feel the energetics and you're like, ugh. And I know that like that took us some practice to like walk that walk and make those mistakes. And um yeah, and so when I was tuning into it, I was like, well, 55 grand from like a corporation to have me consult with them and speak. I mean, maybe that won't even be enough, right? Like they could pay me more than that because it's like a different pot, right? And
mhm.
the like all systems are changing right now, and we can choose our evolutionary path. Um, so when I hear that, you use the word schisms. I like when you say schisms
Mhm.
because it's like there are these schisms that are in what I'm going to call the old paradigm,
Yeah.
right? That chases the external. And again, we're all trying our best because, like, yes, we want to be resourced. Yes, we want to know that we can charge what we need in order to live. Like, we want to know this. And it's also not that simple at all.
Yeah.
Like, that is not the formula. And that's inside of this old paradigm. And the reason that I know that is because it's not talking about feminine replenishment.
Mm-hmm.
It's like these nebulous, like measures that are external
Mm-hmm.
and not actually about the true regeneration and rejuvenation of the feminine. And if it were, we would be talking about collaboration, we would be talking about sharing, and we would be talking about the new template of feminine resourcefulness, which is deeply connected into the eternal soils of creation and altogether different codes and information.
Yep.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's just not present in that whole game in a way that, like, gosh, it's so sad really to feel into it. And again, like, we've been there, we know it was a part of me peeling like layers of depletion. Like, layers of depletion came from those games for
Yep.
me, for sure. And what I was trying to build and what I was trying to charge and what I was, you know, how I was making myself available and how much content I was putting out with the podcast and social media. And like, it wasn't aligned with my design and it wasn't coming from the gnosis
Yep.
in my alignment with source creation. And source creation with a unified mother, father, God, unified masculine and feminine would be inherently replenishing. So for me, the paradigm shift and why I'm hosting resource is because, yes, to the resource sovereignty of those 8 feminine resources, right? But then we can rebuild. I mean, we can't do it in 8 weeks, but we can work toward rebuilding like the energetic light body that is unified in conjunction with source, because we have to be the ones that remember that template and bring it forward. Like,
Yeah.
these external systems are not going to be like, hey, here's the lost template of creation that valued the feminine. Like, we have to do it, right?
It's not written or said anywhere on the screen for us to see.
No.
And I think it is about that path, that remembering of that gnosis in every woman, whether she knows what that word is, whether she knows, if she's hearing this and just being like, what the hell are they talking about? There's an inherent knowing that
Yeah.
she's looking for that path that feels replenished and resourced for herself. And I know for myself, 3 years ago, and this was probably like, I worked with Sarah. We met like at a very transitional time. Maybe I met
Mm-hmm.
you 4 years ago, maybe a little bit,
Mm-hmm. It
but
was
about,
20, it was the winter of 2020
it was like COVID.
because I
Hmm.
remember where I was sitting.
Totally.
And I
Yeah.
remember that I was soon moving out of that house I was sitting in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I remember what relationship I was in. I remember where my my
Mm-hmm.
finances were. I remember what my body felt like. I remember where my consciousness was at. But I went through a massive dark night of the soul of the underworld. Massive. And what I found in there was the gnosis. And I did that through the darkness and through that depletion, right? And through the the rewiring in all of that. And I wish that there was another way, and there may be as we rebuild this, but the darkness, the depth, the grief, the messiness, the not knowing, the not understanding where the directions are is so part of it for women,
Mm-hmm.
because I believe that's
Right.
what's really deconstructing all of those schisms, right? I had a really big understanding of that when I was going through this dark night of the soul, is reconstructing of the feminine consciousness of these schisms, right?
Yeah.
Reconstructing all of that we can't figure out on our own because it's not written, on the storefront, right? And
Right.
we have to go into these places of like I said, the messiness and the depths. And I think that every woman that I know that has gone through that depth and that questioning, that trial and error, is slowly chipping away
Mm,
at that. But and I think that we're doing that more and more as a cultural collective. And now there is, someone like you who is saying, this may be a path. This may be a
mm,
grid. Like this may be, you know, the questions that we need to ask, because I think
mm,
part of that is coming out of that dark night of the soul is, having those inner resources strengthened, but then also finding a place to belong with each
mhm.
other, as
Yeah,
women, and with the
yeah.
land, and feeling like, oh, this is the core, that's the center, right? That's the center of all those resources,
Mm,
is that community and that collective consciousness of us as women. So
mhm, mm,
yeah, I think my point of that is, the confusion that I think so many of us go through as we're finding our way on this path, and as we're working with all these like schisms in our body and our
mhm,
nervous system in our
mhm,
life, as our bank account is zero and our body is X, Y, and Z, and our relationship is falling apart, or we're
mhm,
pretending, right? There's so much
mhm.
pretending that
Right.
we do as women.
Mhm,
As we're moving through that, I think it's so, important and like empowering for women to know, yeah, this is part of it. Is like, we
right.
fortunately, and the fortunate part of it is, while we're on this path, the gnosis is being built, right?
Yeah.
That's the fortunate part. I shouldn't even say the unfortunate part, because it's all
Oh,
so
I mean,
amazing.
you do have to navigate some hell realms and it sucks. Yes, it is unfortunate that it sucks.
It is unfortunate, but it is there. It is. It's necessary, and of course, for women, it's like,
Yeah,
of course, we're going to be the ones that are going to navigate that, right?
freaking do
As
it. Yeah,
parents, and
yeah,
so
yeah. Thanks for opening up like that. And I'll get vulnerable now. Um, um, I just found it like in a drawer. There's this sticky note that I wrote just before I met you. It was like at the end of 2019, the beginning of 2020, or maybe it was during COVID or something. And it was my soul talking to me, and it was like, we got to get resources in the hands of women. So I started using the word resource then, but I was still thinking about resources like women need money,
mm,
right? Like we know that systems change when women have the dollars, right? So, and I want to say that I I have at different times made money, but I've always struggled with money because of sexual traumas, narcissistic traumas, emotional traumas that were all extractive very, very early in my life, like deep, gross extraction.
mhm.
So that template of extraction was there from the beginning, and I think we carry it through our lifetimes for sure. And then there was abuse with finances. Like there was emotional abuse about belonging, right? And finances were really manipulated. So I have always had money issues. And I was told, things like, you're not responsible, you have money issues, you just got to have a better mindset, you just got to work harder, you just,
Right, the
have
money
to,
the money mindset.
all the money shit, right? But I I am still on this path because I really want to help women like link the healing of these extractive traumas. It's not a money issue, really. Like money and extraction get linked, right? Like the extraction of these eight feminine resources. So skipping far ahead, I kept going through these experiences, like the reason that I was moving out of that house when I met you was because like my son and I had been invited to make a life with this man, and it was during COVID, and he like proposed, to invite us into his house. I remember I did the podcast episode with Madeline Moon, like
Oh, that's how I
during
found
that,
you.
and that's how you found me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
because
how I
when she invited me to talk, I was like, now? What the fuck? Right?
found you. Totally.
But because I did not have it together, and I was being kicked out, and I was pissed about resources. I was pissed at like
Mm.
how it had extracted from me
Well,
this
that's
relationship.
it's interesting that you say that you were pissed, right? Like about resources.
Yeah, and I was starting to name it differently. And I mean, there's a big story around this because like this land and I had a very sacred relationship. It's where I was awakening to how the feminine runs through the earth grids and through the land, and like how we actually resurrect it on the planet, right? So this was definitely the time that I was shifting out of some of that mainstream coaching rhetoric, because I was like, oh, okay, the earth grids are starting to talk to me. The land is starting to whisper in my ear. And then what happened was like I was going to have to move again. It was like the second time within a year with my son, with my animals. And I went and like, this is the short version of a very sacred story, but I like fell on my knees in this very sacred portal piece of land. And I was like, what the actual fuck? Because I am showing up to my mission, and I
Mhm.
am reclaiming the feminine, and I'm doing everything I can fucking think of. Why are my resources always attacked? And Erin, I saw hundreds of grandmothers come forward, and they were like beating drums. Some of them were humans, some of them were orbs, some of them were star beings. And they were like, we fucking get it. And like they were wailing with me. Like I
Yeah.
could hear their wails. And then that's when they said, like, we're gonna give you Heartland, and you're gonna teach it. And Heartland has 8 pieces. It's not the same
Right.
8 as the resource wheel, but in that is where the resource wheel came from. But going back to that like post-it that just before that happened, and I hadn't even put it together like this, like actually until this, like we're talking about it right now, because I was calling it in, right? Like this thing in my soul that was like women's resources. Like, so I'm all about resource sovereignty, but not at the expense of those inner feminine
Yeah.
resources, right? So when we start to talk about,
Mm.
any like feminine resource, inner and outer, we start to talk about exchange, right? Because to your point, like you can get sovereign. And this is what happened with me. Over the last 5 years, I had another extractive situation with a man. I know it's not the template that God intended, and I shut down. Like I went into a very complex, sort of very multidimensional, complex PTSD thing. My work suffered for it. I suffered for my, but like as a single woman and mother, and my child matters more to me than anything. I was getting through. Like you could call it a dark night, but I was like trying to stay above water, in many situations. And
Yeah.
I just, I remember feeling in the beginning like, I don't know what the solutions are going to be, but I'm not sacrificing my resources anymore, my inner resources.
Mhm.
And it was like a stopgap. I was like, I know
Yeah.
this much to be true.
Yeah.
And yeah, navigated deep financial depletion, while I would say my internal resources were like better and better all the time, and in the past, I don't know, a while now, my like the guidance, my soul is like trying to be like, and you receive more, and you can open to more. But I tell you what, It doesn't come from how much I can spend or charge. Like that, I think is a
Right.
farce.
Right.
It's
It doesn't come from that.
no, it's a deep somatic. It is so somatic when we heal from the previous traumas of extraction,
Yeah.
then your system is going to be like, sister, you're good to like
Yeah.
practice exchanging again. You're good to like receive more now.
Right.
You know, like
Explore
it's
other opportunities, like explore
right.
different things. Yeah, and I can relate to that. Part of my dark night of the soul years ago, because I went into massive reconstruction on the inside, and in
Yeah.
touch gnosis, like I didn't know. I didn't know until I knew, the same thing for me of like, once I started to reconstruct that in my body,
Yeah.
then that knowing came of, okay, I can now take a step forward. Not
Right.
like I can charge more or I'm going to do that. It was just literally like, it was like I had my the guidance, and I had the inner
Right.
support, and I had that structure to just take the step and then realize, yes, that these external resources, relationship, money, these other external resources are always guided by this inner. That it is 100%
Yes.
like guided by the inner, in the way that we're taught about making money and preserving money, or getting in a relationship, and how that relationship is a bunch of bullshit for women, and that her
Yeah.
inner resources are the thing that will reflect her template to walk forward, and
Yes.
I know that for my life right now. Like, if I
Yeah.
didn't go through that inner structure, there's no ways. I'm in a relationship now. I met him online, and why? Because I just woke up one day and and going online for me, I'm not that person, but I was
Right.
like, I want to be taken on a date.
Yeah.
My structure had just gotten revived
And you
through
could
that.
handle it. Yeah.
I can handle it. Yes, that's the thing, is I can handle it. There was less of this, like, in more like opening. I can receive,
Yeah.
that.
So
And mhm. Go
sorry, I
ahead.
don't want to interrupt you. Well, I want
No,
to
no,
ask
no.
you a question, like right here in this space, because, to your point, like what would have happened if in that moment you were like, you know what I need to do to feel better? I need to put $10,000 on a credit card and hire a coach. Like, what would that have done to your nervous system?
I mean, I would have went backwards in the timeline.
Exactly.
That's the thing. And now when I see those, I recently got approached about some opportunity that required X amount of money, and I like immediately was like, and it doesn't even matter how much, but I immediately was like, no, like no, like my
Right.
internal system, because I don't have all this bullshit, like, sourcing and all the programming running around. I'm like, no, I
Like
know
new
that my
age. Yeah.
channel, yeah, all the new age
Yeah.
stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a bigger story, but I'm just looking at time here.
Yeah.
So I just want to take this opportunity, so women that are listening to this. So when are you doing this 8-week course?
Uh, June 7th. And to be honest with you, I had to push the date back because I didn't have enough interest and signups. And so I'm just speaking really honestly because I'm like in it right now where I'm sitting with, I know that this is precious. I know that this is new paradigm. I know that this is
Yep.
amazing. And if I held the 8-week container for what I have currently made on that 8-week container, I will not be resourced financially. I will
Yeah.
not, it's not worth my time, right? So that's mine energetically to be with. But also, you know, this, I don't want to open this conversation up because of time, but we also like have made it so available and affordable, and I've given 3 pricing tiers because, especially with resource,
Yeah.
I know that a woman can have money or not have money and still be depleted, right? So
Yeah.
I've made these three different pricing tiers, and I need people to value that I've done that. And
Mhm.
I'm really in a significant piece of reconstruction because I am constantly hearing things like, Sarah, I really appreciate that you show up. I've followed your work for so many years, but they don't sign up to go deeper into the containers. And so I'm really having to reconcile, like, do I want to put my energy into that anymore? Which was
Yeah.
probably the worst sales pitch that ever has happened in the history of online marketing just then,
Mhm.
with my honesty. Because, but again, value. Like,
Yeah.
there's so much
Mhm.
value in this, and it is a sacred container. Um, so if this one does not work out, I'm gonna take a break,
Mhm. Mhm.
because the reconstruction is already happening and the
Yeah.
repatterning into the new template where, um, yeah, but I honestly feel like that's what we're doing right now. Like, that's
Yeah.
what resource is.
Yeah. I think
This
what you're
is the
doing is,
template.
yeah, I think what you're offering is like you said, it is so much bigger than it is just so much bigger. And so, whether people sign up or not, it's again maybe just like frequency match or timing.
Yeah.
There's just so much for women. I don't sometimes sign up for things just because of timing. Like I know that my
Mm-hmm.
time isn't as spacious as it used to be,
Mm-hmm.
so it's like that resource at this point of my life right now is at the higher
Mm-hmm.
tier of
Mm-hmm.
what's how I feel resourceful is my
Right.
time, right? Whereas
Mm-hmm.
before
For
I,
sure.
like last year in a different I had a lot more time. And so, so that's an interesting part of that wheel too, of just like
Right.
how maybe the wheel spins and it's like,
Yeah.
well, what's on the top?
For sure.
you
Like, if
know,
we have a ton of time, maybe we have more to create or give, like, within that time. And I feel like that's how I was living. But what's coming in right now for me is like going back to more community. And like you
yeah.
said, like women learning and doing together. And I think this thing of like influencer, or, look, like, I've continued to show up for 7 years now. And, I'm looking at like really real choices. Like, do I just go high ticket coaching? Like,
Hmm.
after all that we just said,
Yeah.
there are professional women on LinkedIn that would not bat an eye at $8,000, which is what I currently charge for private
Hmm.
coaching and quantum
Oh yeah.
healing right now. Right.
Hmm.
And so I want to be of service, but I also need women to respect that I'm a single mother. That
Yeah.
if like, if you value a new paradigm or new thought, but it's way beyond thought, right? Like, if you value work like Erin and I do, investing in it is what is needed. Like, small business needs that,
Yeah.
in order to be replenished and in order to sustain.
Yeah.
And you and I have both, I hope it's okay to say this, but I think so, like, taken on other streams of income
Oh
because
yeah.
this work that calls us is like, it's too much pressure to,
Yeah.
if you start feeling that pressure, you might start trying to charge 55,000.
Yeah. 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 It's a big conversation. So,
Yeah.
well, I just want to see the time here, and my battery on my computer
Okay.
is timely.
We're
So,
expiring.
yeah.
Thank
Well, I
you.
love talking to you, and I hope that whether the course runs right now or not, you'll keep posting about this conversation because I think it's such a dense conversation and a dense topic that women like. I feel like women will like they like dance. We like dance around the topic. We're like, yeah,
Uh-huh.
she knows what she's talking about, and then like go back to like life, and then being like, wait,
Yeah. My
we
friend
actually,
Kelly, yeah, like she said that Kelly Owl, she's an artist. She's amazing. Go buy her prints, go buy her work. But, she was like, yeah, Sarah, I feel like people like feel it and then they're like, oh, fuck, I need money. I'm going to go like do this manifestation course. Right. Um, and I want everyone to have the resources. I want
yeah,
women to have money. Um, but you know what? Like I need to, for years I've been wanting to publish and knowing that I needed to publish and finish Heartland, the book,
oh yeah,
um, and so many times recently I just have wished that I had the book of all of this to be like here.
yeah,
So that's my next step, is not trying to get people's attention on
yeah.
social media, and like maybe not even inviting to a live container for a while, and just like going deep into that creational space to bring forward the thing that people can have and
Yeah.
hold, and yeah, we can
Well, I
all be
hope all
more
the things,
resourced for it.
yeah, I hope all the things that we talked about before we came on here support that for you right now.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for inviting this conversation.
Yeah,
And
I love it. I could talk about it forever.
I
So thank
know we could
you.
go on and on. It's just, it is really, really rich. And I think it's the conversation we need to be having about women's resources. Yeah. So good to see you, Erin. Thank you.
Too.
Thanks everyone for